We do hope for the best for the sake of not only ourselves, but our loved ones that are still in the US. But there are just so many warning signs written on the wall of things are more than likely going to get worse before they get better.
I'm Kai,
And I'm Koyo.
and you're watching
Life with the Lyles. We originally started this channel to document us moving outside of the US to Morocco, knowing that, hey, this is going to be a pretty big life transition for us, and we know that this journey would be an exciting one, and so we wanted to document it not only for our memory, but just for anybody that would find enjoyment in seeing what that would take. Over time, it's grown to a little bit more than that. This channel has kind of turned into sort of an inspiration for other people, which is more than we expected, but we're grateful to be able to inspire and to show that, hey, the world is actually bigger than the US, and there's so much to see out there, and it's not an impossibility to go out and really explore and see the world and live abroad. And one of my favorite quotes is, travel is a book, and if you've only been to one place, you've only read one chapter of that book. And that was just a goal that me and Kai kind of discussed, is what do we want out of life, and we wanted to see the world.
Even though our channel doesn't have a large following just yet, we realized recently just how much impact we have. While we were out, Koyo was getting his hair cut. I was standing outside of the barber shop on the sidewalk. Usually if I see a Black person, I will acknowledge them and like do a little head nod or something. And this gentleman walked past and he asked, "Where's your husband?" And I looked at him confused because I didn't know how to interpret that. But then he turns around, he's like, I recognize you guys from your YouTube channel. I see you and the baby, but I don't see your husband, but I've seen your channel. And so I was like, oh, he's getting his hair cut. And so in that moment, I was like, this is crazy that I'm on a different continent. I'm not in the States, and this guy, he recognized us from our channel, and he's been following our journey because he's trying to make a decision on whether to move to Morocco or somewhere else. And so the fact that people are even using our YouTube channel to kind of make large life decisions of moving their entire family abroad is really, really beautiful to see. A few other women have DM'd me that they're going to be moving this year with their families. So the fact that people are making these decisions is really touching, and also it's just showing just how impactful even our small YouTube channel is. So even though we are in Morocco, we obviously are still keeping up with the US news. And so we're seeing everything that's happening with the militarization of the US, ICE, and the lack of food oversight, and all these different things that were small contributing factors to why we left the US. We're seeing it becoming even more of a disaster. Koyo actually gave a really good analogy as to why we left the US.
I just gave an analogy of, what if you were working for a company whose values didn't align with your values? Maybe they were doing some things that you didn't agree with, some things that went against your moral compass. And sure, you benefited by getting a paycheck every week, but would you stay with that company just because you're getting a paycheck, or you're essentially being paid off to align with that company? Or would you go to another company because you don't want to further progress a company that you know is doing the wrong thing and heading in the wrong direction? In my mind, I never thought of leaving and going to another place as even an option, right? I always thought that this is what it is, and I just gotta stick it out for better or worse. And people really think they only have two options, right? Of having to stay and fight for a change, or just kind of dealing with whatever is happening right now and just trying to push on. But there's actually a third option of going and exploring the world, moving and allowing whatever that is going to happen to take place without you having to be in the center of whatever results that there may be.
Obviously we can preface this with our previous video where we talked about Black Americans leaving, where we recognize that there is a level of privilege with being able to leave the country. Some people don't have the financial means, or sometimes you're elderly, or you are a caregiver, and so there are certain circumstances in which we understand. But there are some people who are able to leave. We are more so talking to them. If it's a consideration, like, we heavily think that it's something that you should maybe act upon sooner rather than later.
We do hope for the best for the sake of not only ourselves, but our loved ones that are still in the U.S. But there are just so many warning signs written on the wall of things are more than likely going to get worse before they get better. Because of that, I mean, these are just a few of the things that me and Kai have noticed that, you should maybe take into consideration for yourselves. A few of the major things that we've been seeing in our news feeds. A huge one is the ICE and ICE raids, and I mean, especially for us being Black in America, it's something to where it's a very familiar scene for us. But what has not been familiar is now that it's affecting any and everybody, regardless of race. And it really reminds me and brings to mind of the quote of an injustice somewhere is an injustice everywhere. And all because one person and one people group is being oppressed doesn't mean that, everybody is safe. All that means is it's the beginning. And so now we're kind of seeing the ramifications of not stepping up and not acting on behalf of an oppressed people, to now that oppression is now coming to a neighborhood near you, so to speak.
Even to that point, like the intensification of surveillance culture, which is happening globally, but especially within the US, with the monitoring of devices, or even at airports where it's basically become deportation checkpoints. I think that these things, the handwriting has always been on the wall. People of color have always been saying this will affect everybody eventually, and now we're seeing what that looks like. And so we see that as just another reason to kind of find your way out of the U.S. if possible. And this is not necessarily to say not to fight. I do think that there is still a way to fight even while abroad. I do think that for the sake of safety and peace of mind, and not just safety for yourself, but safety for your own families.
Again, looking more from the outside in, you're seeing a lot more just like cracks in the system that probably would be interpreted differently if I was still in the U.S. Even something as what happened in Venezuela recently, which looking at that headline was mind-blowing to see and think that something like that is even a possibility. But looking at it from the outside, it's showing that it was basically a resource grab. As a country right now, as inflation is becoming increasingly worse and our economy is starting to show a lot of signs of weaknesses, we're essentially throwing band-aids on the problem by trying to acquire resources from these as we would call them, poorer countries.
And even here in Africa, with the Project 2026 having Africa as a continent in there for the sake of resources, and is another sign that it's a collapsing country, but they're trying to do what they can to try to repair. Another thing we've been monitoring are the food recalls that are happening in the US. It's particularly with the baby formula and just like everything concerning babies. With me being parents and having moved out of the US, it's very frightening to see all of the different things that are happening with the food oversight, where there are just certain things that are slipping through the cracks and people's lives are being lost because of it. And this is, again, something that we're not dealing with here in Morocco. But I think that that's something that is very troubling and is a huge reason why we left.
One part of being a parent is protecting your family and trying to do what is good for them to make sure they have a good, long and healthy, prosperous life. And so that's something that
looks like thinking of the food we're consuming.
Definitely the food that we're consuming. Next thing that we noticed from living in another country compared to when we was at the U.S. was how polarized that we are as a people.
Since moving to Morocco, we have noticed that our mindset has changed on the polarization of what we thought was the world. We thought everybody was polarized globally, when that's actually not the case. The world is not polarized, but the US and Western cultures or Western countries are. And I think this polarization is not necessarily just tied to politics anymore, because now it goes beyond just that to now people's humanities being challenged. And so I think that that's something that we're not experiencing in Morocco. The last thing is the dismantling of a nation and completely stripping citizens of their rights and spiraling into fascism. But I think that things that we've shared today are all the reasons as to why we have left in one way or another. Again, we think that if this is something that you are heavily considering, should maybe go beyond just considering and start planning, and seeing if it is something that is realistic for you and for your family. Again, consider places that are outside of Europe. The world is very vast, and there are lots of places that are safe, contrary to what the US media has portrayed themselves to be is the best country in the world. There are so many other places that are incredible and very welcoming. There's a lot more that we could say on this topic. We obviously we can't go down the entire list of everything that's going on in the States, but we are watching. We're hoping that more Black Americans will consider moving abroad like we did, for your peace of mind, for your safety, because the stress that we have normalized in the US is not universal to living everywhere.
So this hasn't been our usual happy, super cherry video. This has kind of been more of a heavy video, but just it's been something on our heart after talking with a lot of family and friends that are still in the US.
That concludes this week's episode. Make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe. What we want you to comment today is, what is something that you noticed recently that made you want to leave, either the US or the country that you're currently in now?
We'll catch you all in the next video. Peace.